I was trying to show up and give the impression of having it all together. I found that people can respond to trauma or fear in two different types of ways, fight or flight.
Dr. Shai Butler is the author of Better, Not Perfect, From Hot Mess to Life Success, an executive in higher education with over 2.5 decades of experience, a writer for higheredjobs.com, and a career and life strategist for women executives. Her favorite position of all is being the mom of 3 and a wife of 1. And she is here today to share what she's learned from her life experiences, as well as what's inspired the launch of her book, Better, Not Perfect, in the hopes that you will take your past experiences and your challenges and use them to carve an even more powerful path forward. When you take away even just one insight, philosophy, tip, or strategy from this conversation with Dr. Shai, all that we ask is that you share this show with just one other person who could use it as well. You are the reason the Be Better broadcast has grown the way that it has over the past 2 years, because you are the best part of the Be Better team. So without further ado, let's talk to Dr. Shai. It's great to have you on the show, Dr. Shai.
It's so good to be here, Brandon. Thank you so much for the invitation and the opportunity.
Absolutely. It's great to have you on. You're up to a lot of big things right now. A lot's
Hi.
happening, right?
Yes,
Your book
yes,
just launched in February. And
yeah.
again, if you can show everyone here, I'll even change
Would
the view for those
love
watching.
to show the book Better, Not Perfect, From Hot Mess to Life Success. And the
It's
subtitle
beautiful.
is, thank you, A Woman's Guide to Learning, Loving, and Being Herself Unapologetically.
Learning, loving, and being yourself unapologetically.
Yeah.
So, what inspired you writing this book? Because you're up to a lot. You've got a lot going on in your life. You're a mother, you're a wife, you are you're a coach, you've got a career you're building. Like, why take the time to put this book together?
Wow. Um, you ever have that thing in life that you're called to do and you tried to walk away from it, step away from it, put it away? Maybe it was because it was too difficult, or maybe, um, I don't know, maybe you just kept saying, the time's not right, the time's not right. That was me for a long time, for actually 9 years. And it took me that long. I said, geez, it takes women 9 months to give birth to a baby on average. But it took me 9 years to give birth to my life story. And I realized, it came when it was supposed to come, much like babies. Came when it was ready. I still had more living to do 9 years ago that I couldn't have put in a book. I wasn't ready to put in a book. I wasn't ready to share, because this is a very open, transparent, and raw memoir, where I really go deep and tell about some past traumas and experiences, with the goal and hope to help other women who had early trauma that maybe turned them into perfectionists like myself, and who also struggle with things like imposter syndrome, just to name a few things that I speak to in the book, and how to overcome it, how to still be great, how to still be called into purpose. So,
That's beautiful. I
thank
have
you.
definitely some questions that dissect more into that. So, this idea of, you mentioned that you struggled with this idea of perfectionism,
Yeah,
right? And being a perfectionist in general. What does that mean, or how did that physically manifest itself in your life?
sure. Well, I found so early in my life, I'll take it back, and I'm not giving up much from the story. So I got pregnant at 13. I had a baby at 14, started college at 16, failed out at 18. And so those early experiences sort of formed me into this person that said, okay, I have had some real failings in life. But one of the things I talk to my clients about that I had to learn early on was how to fail, but not identify as a failure. But around that time, I was being treated like I was a failure. People were very disappointed. A lot of friends, family had invested in me and had huge goals for me. And I felt like I just screwed it all up. And I found that people can respond to trauma or fear in two different types of ways, fight or flight. I'm a fighter. I chose to fight. And fighting for me looked like, oh, I'll show you. I'm no failure. I'll 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 show you. I will go on to do great things. I will go on to succeed. And I lived my life for decades trying to prove that I was not this 13-year-old screw up who everyone sort of during that period of my life really looked down on. Um, Grew up in a very religious home, very faith-filled home, very weekly church goer. It's hard to be in church as a teenager who's pregnant, you know. So there were a lot of hard things I had to do. It's already hard being a new mom, but it's harder when you're going through, you know, the emotions of a high schooler. Add on top of that motherhood, add on top of that, the denigration of your community, the isolation of your close friends, because I don't know if you know, but I heard that pregnancy is contagious, and if you let your other teenage daughters hang out with a teenager who gets pregnant, your daughter might wind up pregnant. So I
Wow.
had to live through like a lot of that, and it caused a lot of trauma. And
Yes.
so I chose to fight. I chose to fight. But fighting meant that I wanted to show up perfect forever
Mm.
after.
Yes. Was there someone in your life at that time that inspired you and showed you that there was a choice, and the choice was I'm going to fight. I'm going to show them who I am, what I can do, because sure, that's a choice, but sometimes we're not even aware of the different choices that we have. Who or what made you aware that that was even an option for you?
My mother, primarily. My dad had some influence there. I remember the day I called to tell him, with my mother sitting by my side, that I was pregnant. My parents were separated for since I was two, so they were separated all my life till my father passed away. But you know, I'll never forget what my dad said to me on the phone when I told him that here I am, this, his 13-year-old daughter, his only child, and
Mm,
I'm pregnant. And he said, I said, Daddy, I'm pregnant, please, please don't stop loving me. And I'll never forget what he said. God bless his soul. He said, there is nothing in this world that you could ever do that would make me stop loving you. So, having a father's love, having a mother who said, no matter what, she said, you trust me, you are not the only person in that church, in this community, in this world who has made a mistake. And so you walk with your head held up high because you are going to do this. She encouraged me. She said, we're going to do this together. You don't have to do this alone. But wherever you walk, you hold your head up. You don't let people make you feel small. You don't play yourself down. People make mistakes. It's not the falling, it's the getting back up. So
that's beautiful.
thank
It's
you.
great that you had that support in your parents, because for those who might share a similar story, that might not be the case. But then again, that's where other role models come into play, right? And we're blessed at points in our lives to have those people who do enter our life, sometimes serendipitously. Like for me, as an example, very different story. Of course, I wasn't pregnant at 13,
Yeah.
but I struggled in other ways when I was 19, 20, 21, and throughout my growing up. And it's almost as if the universe places the people that you need in your presence at the exact moment that you need them.
Yes. There's a saying, when the student is ready, the teacher appears.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very true. Yes.
Mm.
So you move forward at this point. Okay. And this was your youngest daughter, right? At this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Okay.
This was
Gotcha.
she was my only child for 20 years. And so there until her brother came along, who's my middle child. And then my last one came along a year after. So I have 20 years between my first and second child.
Wow. Okay. So while you have your, I should say not your youngest daughter, your oldest daughter now,
Mhm.
you go through school, right? And you mentioned that you're living alone at a point, being a mother, living alone while going for your bachelor's degree, right?
Mhm.
Do you still have at this point, is that fire still there now, years later, to continue moving forward, to show them? Does your motivation change at this point, or is it still, I need to keep moving forward?
Brandon, I think for me, it's going to be a lifelong struggle with perfectionism. I love to say I've overcome it, but sometimes I backslide into it. So at this time, maybe it was episodic, I would say. If I got a bad grade in a class, I'll show them. If I had a bad relationship end, I'll show him. And my showing him was, oh, I'm going to drop 20 pounds and go lease a new vehicle and, and buy a new wardrobe and step out fly. I mean, it was just and literally like those are some of the things that I would like really do. I was just this thing of I gotta woman up. But it was all surface stuff. It really was. It wasn't okay. I'll show him. Let me go get emotionally healthy and start seeing the therapist. It was. I'll show them. It's not let me. Um, do X, Y, or Z. It was a focus on the exterior and the external stuff that I was most focused on showing people as opposed to showing that I was perfect instead of actually being better. Hence the
Mm,
book. Mhm.
yeah. So you've mentioned a couple times now this lifelong challenge of perfectionism.
Mhm.
What does it mean to be a perfectionist in your worldview? What does that mean?
It means stress and pressure that we place on ourselves to look like um, we have it all. There's a lot of talk in executive and professional circles. I coach. Um, I don't like to use the word coach because really what I do more with women and I really help them develop a strategy for career and life. And so that's different. I tell people if you need guidance, call a coach. If you need therapy, call a counselor. If you need a plan, call Dr. Shea.
Mm,
So I really help women develop plans and strategies at work or for life because this is real. I mean, there's no auditions. We're creating this as we go. So it's good to have a plan. So you know, really the work around perfectionism that I've found is that, I was trying to show up and give the impression of having it all together. And, the talk about, can you have it all at the same time? That's the talk in professional circles. Some say, yeah, you can have it all at the same time. You just have to know what you want and be willing to sacrifice and go for it. And others say, you know, you can have it all, but no, not at the same time. I think I straddle that fence of having it all and having it all at the same time. I believe that you can have it all at the same time, but you got to be willing to pay the price because there's a cost associated. You
mm,
can't say, I want it all and I want it all at the same time. That means and every woman has to define all for themselves. Every person has to define all for themselves. So if all for you was similar to what all for me was, I had to have the career, I had to have the husband, the children, the home, the garage, that was my all, the picture perfect. And so the problem is what I don't think we often talk about or are transparent enough about when we talk to women or people about having it all is you will pay a price. You cannot expect to say, I'm going to be an executive and I'm going to work 60 to 80 hours a week. And yes, you can have the children, but you can't then wonder why maybe at a certain point you don't have that closeness that you would have had with the children that you've birthed. but you can't work 80-hour weeks, 60, 70, 80-hour weeks and build relationships and rapport and say, I really want a healthy marriage, but we're never in the same room, let alone the same town or the same, and now there are periods in life when that will be the case. I mean, there was a period certainly in my marriage where my husband and I were literally like passing each other in the driveway, we're like, just quick kiss in the driveway. And then he was off and I was off because we're both executives. But that can't be long standing. It can't be. So I challenge people who say, I want it all, count the cost. You can have it all, but there's going to be a price.
What's the price going to be? Is it your well-being? Is it your energy? Is it something different?
For me, the price was burnout. I completely burned out and I hit a brick wall. For me, the price of trying to have it all and make it look like I was doing it flawlessly and perfectly meant alcohol addiction and hydrocodone addiction just to manage my life.
Hmm.
I mean, I worked an 8 to 8, or 9 to 5, and then I'd come home and then it's job 2. So for executives who are parents, you come home, you don't just, get to just throw on Netflix and veg out. If you're a parent, you got a parent. So so you take off one hat, you show up. Um, Whoever's on deck to cook dinner that night cooks dinner that night. Whoever's on, and maybe for us in our home, I was the primary person that cooked dinner because I enjoy cooking.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I, you know, wore that role. And my husband did more of the cleaning, and I was more of the front caregiver. But we shared a lot of that. But I really enjoy reading stories, so he would give the baths. So we'd have a division of labor, but it was still labor. It was a labor of love, but it was still labor. So you do that, right? So those are just the primary things, work and family. Now you've got all this other stuff from me. Community, I sat on community boards. I was active, involved in my church. Um, I've started, to do consulting on the side. I started to do speaking. I was traveling, doing speaking. And then I was also working on a doctorate at some point during it.
Wow.
So my boys were 5 and 7 when I started my doctorate. So here I again, trying to have it all. And at the time, and I talk about this in the book, the time I was pursuing my doctorate, I was also losing my mom to
Hmm.
cancer, and it was just a traumatic time. But yeah,
So you said yes to a lot of
that's it.
different things
Yeah.
at all at once, which it baffles me that you were able to do that for as long as you did that. Was there a moment that you noticed, I'm saying yes to everything around me? This is harming my well-being. This is preventing me from, like what you said, developing that closeness with family
Mhm.
and really excelling in one role versus doing many different roles. Like, what was that moment that you said, I need to change something?
Well, I think you can do all those things, but you won't do all those things well.
Mm,
That's just, you just don't have the capacity because there's only 24 hours in a day. So I mean, early on, I had to realize, being in this very competitive, it was an executive doctorate program through Northeastern, um, and they told us in class, like at orientation, for the next few years, don't plan on seeing your family at Thanksgiving. You
wow.
know? And I used to host Thanksgiving, so that was like, what? No way. But when I saw the amount of work that was coming at me, um, I made a decision to step off from. I dropped 2 boards. I kept one, but I dropped 2. So I
Mm,
was on 3 boards at the time. So I began to make certain decisions. I had a conversation with my husband, and I said, okay, um, I need you to sort of step up and do more of the mothering piece of the parenting that I was doing, because I knew that the travel and the homework, and he was great about it. And we've done that. I think that's one of the reasons why our marriage is has been successful, is that at different points in time we were able to step up for the other. So
Hmm.
he stepped up for me in that instance. So I had to be able to communicate, to navigate some of these things, but it was still too much for one woman to handle. Even though I did try to, again, I did try to say no to some things, and I did take some things off of my plate. You can't take your mother dying of cancer off your plate, right?
Of
So
course.
I had to reprioritize, and that meant at one point I took time off from work. I took FMLA, and for just part of the week, I didn't even know I could do that. But so from like Thursday to Sunday, I was a primary caregiver for my mom. So I would, and this went on for a couple months in her
Hmm.
last days, and I would drive down to New York City where she was in hospice, and I would be the point person to help my sister, who was the point person those other days. So communication, trying to leverage those resources around you, people who can help you, who may be willing to raise their hand and provide you some support. But I'm that type of person that it's hard for me. I mean, like I've got to be just about at this brick wall before I'm going to ask for help.
Mm.
And so, because I had this thing along with the perfectionism came this, I have to be the strong person. I have to be seen as overly competent and very strong. So, yeah.
You must still have that though. You must still like, because there all these different things. I understand the harm in taking on too much and everything else you've described. And at the same time, I can see benefit in applying pressure to yourself in order to move forward. Because I think that there's two extremes, right? There's the extreme of doing and wearing 8 different hats, but there's also the extreme of, you know, I just want to be chill and meditate, and whatever comes will come in my life. And they don't do anything, and they're broke, and they don't know what's next for them. And these aren't the type of people that you generally work with. The people you work with have very different problems, and I'm assuming that they're on one end of the extreme. That is, they're wearing many hats and they want help to create a plan forward. But at the same time, that having pressure can be a good thing. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Um, I didn't really understand it until um, one of my children is involved in competitive sports. So as he's an athlete, so I've learned some lessons through watching him. Like, and we can learn from our children. I have learned lessons from all three of mine. My my daughter, that I had as a teenager, is an amazing, beautiful woman. She's actually a clinical psychologist, and I am just like thrilled at her. She lives in New York City. She's doing her thing, and I just feel blessed to have been a part of her journey to womanhood, as her mom. And then, I have an athlete, my second one, who's looking at college right now, and he's about to go off to college this year. But some of the lessons I've learned from competitive sports, I've actually taken to use in my practice, where I, the saying, "Hey, there are no losses, there are only lessons." I'm like,
Mm.
oh my God, that is so true. I got to use that. And then, and then my youngest he's like this tech genius, like digital mastermind that I know is going to be like off in Hollywood creating movies or doing, like, he's just so good at it. And to be
Wow.
16. So, I have learned a lot of lessons in life. So I don't think, but going back to the question you asked about the Akuna Matata people, you know, I wanted to, while I'm not maybe, positioned that way, I can understand it. And I actually value the lessons that they have taught me because they bring more balance to me. There is a place that I've gone to for years called Camp Deer Park in West Brookfield, New York. It's a Mennonite camp, and it is my refuge place. It's where I go on my personal retreats and just to chill. And I remember I'm going through a really tough time in life. And I remember talking to some of the staff there, and I was saying, maybe I could just walk away, this was before I met my husband and had the two boys, but I was going through a rough time in life. And I said, maybe I need to just switch it up. Maybe I need to like come and live here with you all, and I can like volunteer, because they had that where people could come and live and help run the camp. And I was like, wouldn't that be great? It would just be so great if I could just come and just give it all up and just, be with you all at peace. And the camp director at the time, who knew me very well because I've been coming up there for years, this is not the place for you.
Wow.
He said, He said, this is the place where you come to fill up so you can go back down there and do the work. You are a person called to do the work. And I'm so glad he said that to me, because while I didn't want to hear it at the time, I wanted to have hand me a dish rag and say, hey, we need help. Come
Your
on,
room's
let's
over
do it.
there.
You can just sleep till 10 every morning and get up and meditate and walk around and feed the llamas and walk the trails. And, you know, he was right. It wasn't me.
Yeah. What great advice that was. I asked that question because I also identify as a doer and someone who I have to be doing things. Like there are some days where it's like extreme with me, and I feel like I could benefit from a retreat such as what you just mentioned, because there will be days where I don't have something happening, which is very rare. But when that day happens, it's almost as if I'm sad that day. I'm sad on the days that I'm not doing things. And I'll look forward to a morning that I can sleep in until 8 a.m. And normally I'm up at 6, which isn't extreme. But if I know I can sleep in until 8, I'm like, oh, this is going to be amazing. I'm going to love this. And then I sleep in until 8 and I get up and start my day. But it's just a weird lagging feeling that I get when I do that. And I'm not sure if that's because I'm out of my routine or if it's because I'm wired in a way where I always want to be doing things. But if I get through my day and I didn't create something or achieve something or do something, I'm sad. So it's curious whether that's the way that we're wired or if we learned that somewhere in our life. I'm not quite sure, but that's why I asked you that question.
Yeah, I think it's a both and, honestly. I mean, it's certainly what I saw role models in front of me. I mean, my mom was like always on the go. She um, always had something going on. It was mostly, work, church, community stuff. She was just out there all the time. Um, my husband has better balance, though. It's interesting. And I think in some ways, too, that's what makes our marriage work, is that, you know, I will be the one with 10 things on my schedule that day. And he'll be the one with one thing on his schedule that day that he'll really focus on and put everything into, you know. And so we get into these debates about, can people really multitask? I know there's been some like recent research and articles out there about that. Or, do you really multitask? And then, does that change as you age? And so we get into some really rip roaring debates on that.
Have you read the book called The One Thing by Gary Keller?
No, not yet. Oh goodness, I'm building my list. So yeah, I will.
Great book.
All right,
Great
I'm
book.
going to grab it. Thank
It talks exactly about that. It's one chapter, but he says multitasking doesn't exist, and he gives like a bunch of research on it. And I know that it rings true for me that when we're multitasking, we're essentially just switching between different tasks. And when we switch, we lose like 15 to 20 minutes of productivity when we do it. But, I say that I like to do and I like to achieve, but at the same time, I'm not one of those people where I say to myself, I can only focus on this one thing for the next 3 hours. Like I realize that is a productivity strategy, but I don't subscribe necessarily at this point in my life. I'm sure for a lot of executives of large companies, it's different and they need to, but I don't subscribe to the live my life hour by hour and everything is scheduled and structured. Like, I like to do what brings me joy. Like, even before this conversation, I had an hour between the last podcast where I ate some lunch and I had 30 minutes. So I picked up my guitar and I played guitar for a bit. And that put me in a great state of mind. So
Yeah.
I think it's valuable to know,
Yes. Yeah.
like what you said, what fills your cup, like what fills you back up. That retreat filled you back up. For
Mhm.
me, what fills me is playing guitar and doing things like open mics and reading in the morning and having my morning routine. So I think that doing the things that does fill you back up with that energy is so vital
It's
to
so
your
true.
happiness and your success.
It's so true. And when you go away from it, for me, I, sort of lost some of that balance and was just all about work and family, because there's a lot going on with family this year when you're launching, one off to college, and then you got one right behind them who's in college search process. So I've got two on this path, one graduating this year, one graduating next year. So your days, I was neglecting self. I wasn't doing those things that I enjoy. And that's a dangerous place for me. I realize that, being in recovery, being, that I've got to be vigilant about, certain things that add meaning and value to my life, because I know what my triggers are. And so that's why I preach learn yourself, love yourself, so you can be yourself unapologetically, because that's the journey I had to go on to drop this notion of perfection and to pick up the banner of better, because, and better in a really, um, defined way that adds grace, self, like giving myself grace that I had a very difficult time, doing. That was something I had a difficult time doing in the past. Sometimes, and some of your audience may relate to this, I'd be my own worst critic. Like, first thought of the day, like negative thought, like sit up, oh, I can't believe I was too tired to do dishes. I left dishes in the sink, you know come on, Shay, you got to do better. Like, really? Like, your first thought, welcome world, hello world. I didn't do the dishes. I left the dishes in the sink. Like, seriously, like, I have to, like, really intentionally say to yourself, you know what, girl, it doesn't matter. Do them later.
Yeah.
Send a teenager down the door. Whatever. Just don't hang on to that. Don't start your day in that way. And so I've gotten to this habit now of getting up in the morning and going out for a morning walk. And especially now that the weather's nice, and I used to love to do that. And now my walk is turning into a run, because I used to love to jog and run. And so it's constant evolution towards better. And so,
Yes.
mhm,
That's so true. I love that we're going in that direction. So let me ask you,
mhm.
and by the way, there's a lot of men listening to this podcast too, so they're gonna get a taste of what they might not normally get, because I know that you're the normal client that you work with is executive women who are out to make a difference in the world. Is that right?
Well, last night I actually was talking to one of my male clients, because I said to him, "You got to give me a review, for my website that I'm building out, because most of my reviews are from women that I'm,
Yeah.
like, planning on this new website that I'm launching." And so, no, we spent an hour on the call last night, and he had some pretty some aha moments as we really got into it, because I speak plain. That's the one thing about writing a transparent memoir. You don't have to hold back.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're willing to be vulnerable, people are willing to be vulnerable with you, and now people can have authentic conversations, as opposed to, we got to spend 10 sessions before I even get to know the real you, because you're hiding so much. So that's been good. So yeah, fellas, I'll take you on too as a client if you're
They're listening. They're tuned in and they're like, I'm getting something good here.
yeah.
So let me ask you, when you're working with your clients, and let's say they're a new client of yours and you're really digging in, let's say that they're already willing to be open with you and you can get right to it.
Mhm.
How do you help them to create that strategy? And let's say that they were in a similar situation as you and they had all these different things on their plate and their identity is very much attached to their work and everything else they're doing. How do you help them develop a strategy? Where do you generally begin?
Well, we begin really around, because we begin around our values. That's how we set the foundation. So we do values alignment work. So we do values prioritization, then we do values alignment work. um, and then we talk about season, like what season, because I need to kind of get a gauge, what for this season of your life, where are you finding purpose? What is it that you're called to do right now? And what is it, goals and strategy, you build out. We use a template that's similar to a strategic plan, but it's more like it that companies and organizations use. um, but it's structured and designed. Mine is designed that is at the individual level. But just like with strategic planning, we start with, what is my mission? What are my values? What is my vision statement? So that's typically where we start out, and then we build out the plan from there.
So let's dive into that. So this idea, and I don't know if I'm just missing something here because a lot of people talk about values, right? And
Mhm,
that's like the starting place for so many different people. And when I think of values, I think of, the normal list of values:
mhm,
honesty, integrity, compassion, strength, service, contribution, all these different things. So now we have words on a piece of paper. How can we take those words and align with them? Like what does a practice or exercise of aligning values look like, and how is it practical?
it's practical in that we compare it to, this is a common tool that a lot of coaches use with clients, and it's called the wheel of life. So one of the things that I do is I like to have my clients complete that wheel of life, and we look at the things that I say I value. How do they translate into these categories of my life? So in the wheel of life, we're looking at how much time are we spending on all these different activities. So there's work, there's health, there's friendships, relationships. There are numerous categories and components of our lives that are on the wheel. So we'll do the values exercise, and then we'll look at, okay, let's map this. You know, are you living a life in alignment with the values you espouse? And if not, then where's the let's do this quick gap analysis here. Like, so what's missing? What needs to be added? What needs to be taken away so that we can now find congruency? And that is at the core, in essence, of what you build a plan around, is that it's really values alignment to purpose for this season. And I always say for this season, because I always get asked when I talk to clients who particularly are not in a great emotional space, you know, I just don't know what my purpose is. I got a job, I have a career, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I just don't know what my purpose is. I just don't know if this is it.
Mm.
And I like to encourage people and let them know what my feelings are about purpose, is that if you are a person of faith, no matter what your faith is, if there is a creator, if you believe there is a creator, and if you believe that creator is all powerful, and you believe that on average you're going to have about 80, hopefully more, years of life, do you really think an all wise creator is going to give you one thing to do on this planet? So
Wow.
let's shed that notion right there, right? So there's purpose for seasons.
I've
So
never
that's
heard of that before, by the way. That's a new concept. I've never heard it described that way.
well, thank you. I don't hear it often either. I just always hear the angst, and I just had an aha moment, and it's so funny that you say that, because I just did a talk of the one we talked about, a business summit, Albany Women's Business Summit, for the Albany Review, and a woman came up to me afterward and said the same thing. She said, "You don't know how you have freed me, because I was really just so, how can I be this age and stage of life and still not know my purpose?" And we walked it through, because I can tell you, at 20, in that season of my life, there were things that I was called and purposed to do, that you cannot convince me that I was in the wrong space and place. But it's not the space that I'm in now, because
Mhm.
now it's a different season. And now I'm called and I'm purposed to do things for this time to make impact. So I made impact in my 20s and my 30s and my 40s and now my 50s. but they were all different. And they
Yeah.
were all purpose, and they were all calling, and they were all important, and they were all
It's
impact.
so true. You make me think of my life now and like what I've done in it. And I just think back again to when I first became a leader. I trained a lot of new salespeople. And my purpose at that point was I want to help these 20 new salespeople every single month to learn the ropes so that they can improve their life. And over time, that starts to shift and warp and change. And it turned into Be Better Industries in 2019. And then in 2021, this broadcast started. And now I'm still contributing
Yeah.
and helping and doing what I love, but it's a different medium of contribution. But
Mhm.
I feel that the purpose of wanting to help people
Mhm.
has stayed the same,
Mhm.
but the medium in which I enact that service is what's changed.
Mhm. I would agree. I mean, I call myself the CEO, the Chief Encouragement Officer. I've been encouraging people using different mediums for most of my life. Um, and I could say maybe that's what I'm purposed to do. But what I don't want is people to get caught up in, first I'm called to do spreadsheets and help people balance their bottom, their budgets and do bottom line, and maybe that's it. Or no, maybe I'm really called to help people fundraise and help them meet their missions and fulfill their goals. Hmm. Or maybe I'm called to really mentor people, and it's about finding congruency and what's sort of the foundational central point. Either way, you feel like you're helping. So what that help looks like at different phases and stages of your life may differ, but don't get caught up and use the wrong terminology or be focused on the wrong thing, when really it's about finding what is that core central thing that motivates, inspires me, and where I can make the greatest impact.
That's so true. Yeah, well said. Absolutely. Oh man, I have so many questions I want to ask you, but I we don't have the world's most amount of time. So what I do want to know is have your children read your book?
Yes, my children have read my book. The
Okay.
better question is, has my husband? No, he's, he has this joke though. I had to get him the audio copy though, because
Okay.
and don't take offense, man. Some of you may agree or disagree. He said, if you ever want to hide things from a man, put it in a book. You know. So when I wrote it and I handed it to him, I said, "Here, read this. The world is going to read it. You should read it first."
Mm.
And actually talked him through many of the stories. He's in it. He's like a major part of like the last two or so chapters.
Aw.
Um, so he did. He read it, and the children have read it. Yeah, because and I was so proud at my book launch. It was an amazing event back in February. The book launch February 14th. One of my sons was actually working the sales table, and the other one was in line. He was buying a book, and he came over to have me sign it and take a picture with me. And he goes, "Mom, I'm
Aw.
so," and they heard me
That's
talk, and
lovely.
he was like, "Mom, I'm so proud of you." So people said, you told your children that you were a teen mom. You told your kids that you failed out of college. You told your kids that you were an alcoholic. Like, what? Wow, like that's how did they, timing was everything. I waited till they were old enough to understand these different things, the significance and importance of telling them, because I do believe there's a genetic component to alcoholism and addiction. I am the daughter of an alcoholic. My dad was an alcoholic and he was an addict. Um, and I go into that more in the book and what that does to a person. And that also ties to trauma, ties to perfectionism, ties to imposter syndrome. So these things that we're experiencing, I don't want us to think that it's all necessarily derived from our life experience. Some of these things are inherited. So they needed to know for that reason as well. So yeah, it's a family affair. My daughter could, everyone's in it.
That's amazing. I
Thank
love that. And if you what do you hope that your children specifically take away from reading your book? What would you want them to take away from it?
you. When I started with my book coach, she said, "What is this book going to be about? Why are you doing this? What if you could find one word?" What do you want your readers to walk away feeling, knowing, having? And I said, without pause, freedom, freedom. Because I have imprisoned myself for so many years that I had to learn how to escape from a jail that I created. And if I could say to them, don't create that jail, if I could say to them, don't put these expectations on yourself that, don't let me put my expectations on you. This is the life, a gift you've been given, and you've got to connect with your creator, um, have a relationship, determine your purpose for the different seasons of your life, and care less about what other people think or say about you. If you are living your life with integrity, with love, with compassion, with empathy, with drive, with ambition, but good ambition, um, yeah, then you can be free, and you can be free. And I
What
want
a
that.
message.
Thank you.
What a message. Love that. Is that the same advice that you would give to 13-year-old Shay?
Whew. I cry when I think of 13-year-old Shay sometimes. The first time I was introduced to 13-year-old Shay was actually in therapy session, as a 40-something-year-old woman, late 40s, when I finally entered therapy, back doorway through grief counseling, and stayed because I realized I needed it. Um, and I had to meet this little girl. I realized that I was so hard on that little girl for so many years. And I had to come to terms to love that little girl. Um, and then when I did, then I began to have more positive messages for her.
Mm,
Like, you can do this. You are not what they say you are. You are more than the sum total of your failures. You're a queen in the
mm.
making. So yeah, but it took me a while to be able to say those things to her because I resented her. She was the cause of a lot of my problems, that 13-year-old girl, as a
Wow.
woman. So I thought. So I
So
thought.
once you were able to say those things, how did your life change?
Still changing because some days I don't, some days I wake up and I still blame her, and other days I'm better. So I'm on this journey to better. And I think how that impacted my life was I couldn't start my journey to better until I learned how to love her, embrace her, give her grace. And yeah.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And thanks for sharing everything that you shared up until this point, because it's one thing to put a book together about these are the 3 steps to conquer your life. It's another thing to put a book together that shares very intimate and vulnerable sections of your life and pretty much your entire life, and put it all out there in the attempt to share a lesson and inspire people to change by using your story. It's very different. And I just got to say, it's a very good thing this show is not titled Be Perfect, because you because you probably wouldn't be here right now.
No,
So
that's Be Better really resonated with me, Brandon. So when I had the chance, I was like, oh yeah, my people, I gotta talk to this guy.
I love that. I love that. So could you hold your book up again for everyone listening? For those who are watching, this is Dr. Shay's book. It is Better, Not Perfect: From Hot Mess to Life Success. There is a link in the description to go grab your copy of Dr. Shay's book. You got to read the book, get your hands on it ASAP. And Dr. Shay, is there a good place for people to follow and to connect with you on social media or wherever you hang out?
Sure. So I know it's old school, but I'm going to say go to my website, www.drshaibutler.com. That's DRSHAIBUTLER.com, because it has all my social handles on that page. And it also tells you how you can get the book on that page.
Amazing. Congratulations on the launch of your book. Congratulations on the path that you are forging ahead for your life and the life of your children, and the role model that you are for your children, but also for so many young women and so many just women and people and human beings in general who are going to read it and be touched by your story. And thank you for sharing what you shared today on the broadcast. It was amazing having you on the show.
Thank you, Brandon, for all that you do to help us on our journeys to better.
This was an awesome conversation about perfectionism and imposter syndrome and how much should we do and how do we know what to do next? How do we create a path forward? And you got those answers from Dr. Shane. You got those answers not from some textbook philosophy, but from what she has learned from the experiences that she's had in her own life, from being a very young mother to then living alone as a mother while getting her degree and then rising up in her career to the highest levels and still figuring out there's more to work on, there's more to grow, because the path is all about being better, not perfect. And she enunciates that very well in her book, Better, Not Perfect: From Hot Mess to Life Success. I hope you took a ton out of this conversation. Continue the conversation by going to the description and connecting with Dr. Shai, and most importantly, grabbing a copy of her book so you can take what we talked about today and dive into each piece, and grab a copy for the people that you love in your life too. And if it's a guy, then get him the audiobook. You heard her say that herself. If you took away anything from this conversation, then all that we ask is you share it with just one other person who could use these words of inspiration as well. The world needs it right now. Share the show with just one person. Thank you for being the best part of the Be Better team and helping us to grow to nearly 300 episodes, which is mind-blowing. Thank you so much for watching and listening. And until we talk again next time, continue to be better.